I'll quote him from the introduction to في ظلال القرآن. في ظلال القرآن, in the Orientalist translation of it is in the shadows of the Qur'an. It's more commonly known in English as in the shade of the Qur'an. And he says in his introduction, I have lived in the shade of the Qur'an, gazing from on high at the jahiliyyah that is surging over the earth, at the trivial concerns of its adherents. I look at the shared admiration of the adherents of this jahiliyyah for what they have of the knowledge of children, the conceptions of children, and the concerns of children. The way a grown-up looks at children playing, the attempts of children, and the lathra of children. I'm not sure what that means. And I'm amazed. What is the matter with these people? What is the matter with them? That they wallow in the stinking mud and hearken not to the magnificent call from on high, the call that elevates life, blesses it, and purifies it. So that's a very powerful formulation. And I'll just read a little portion of his introduction to Surah Al-An'am. It's been translated, published in selections from Fi Dhilal al-Quran that was published in Bangladesh. And I won't read it all, but I'll just make some references to it. He talks about how, Allah calls our signs to all the features of the heavens and the earth, and that, that clearly indicates that there's someone who has created it, someone, the intelligent designer who's in control. And he says the real issue is not the existence of Allah. The problem for humanity has always been ignorance of the true Almighty and His qualities and attributes. The polytheist Arabs to whom this surah was addressed did not deny the existence of Allah completely. This is the point that all Muslim scholars make. They acknowledged His existence and His rububiyyah, that He controlled all that happens. But they didn't acknowledge His right to have a say in the way they ran their lives. So now you see the Salafi take on that. They would start with that same preliminary, and then they would say, but they directed their devotions towards angels and idols and the pious. His direction, after starting from the same premise, he says, but the transgression which made them polytheists was the fact that they did not put this conviction into practice. This would have meant the recognizing and applying of only the divine legislation in all their affairs and denying any authority to any other. Thus they would have no law but that ordained by Allah, and would accept no authority but His in formulating their way of life. And then he goes on to talk about how atheism had sort of washed over the world, a dark wave, and that various peoples had begun to doubt the existence of God, even though the vast majority of people kind of acknowledge Him, but due to the influence of these evil enemies of mankind, this small handful, that the masses have become convinced that Allah has nothing to say with how the rules we make for how to run our collective lives. It says it's greatly doubtful that the atheists believe themselves. Atheism probably started out as a maneuver against the Christian church, and then later on the Jews started using it for the purpose of destroying the fundamental basis of human life in order that they might be the only nation on earth to establish life on this basis. And in parentheses, he says, this is stated in the protocols of the elders of Zion. This would lead to the collapse of all human orders, and then when everybody has lost their faith, then the Jews would be the only people left with a faith. This is the gist of it. And then he says the only people that stand in the way of that are the Muslims. And and that the Jews and the Christians, they saw that they couldn't directly take the Muslims away from their religion if they approached it and tried to make them change their religion overtly. So they said what they were interested in was just making them misunderstand their religion and reducing it to a ritual content. And if they did that, then that would be good enough. And he says they've resorted to the establishment in all these areas of regimes and social orders which try to dress themselves in Islamic robes rather than reject Islam outright. Having put on such false and deceptive guise, these regimes then proceed to put into effect all the plans referred to in the missionary conferences and the Zionist protocols, which the Zionists and Crusaders could not implement over the ages. These regimes and social orders raise the banner of Islam, or at least declare their respect to religion, while applying at the same time laws different from those ordained by Allah, ousting the divine law from the life of society, and legalizing what Allah has forbidden. They try to spread the materialistic values and base concept of life and morality with the aim of destroying Islamic values and concepts. And then he goes into how, as a part of this theater to deceive the Muslims, they set up these kind of conflicts between the Western regimes and these regimes which are ruling the Muslim countries to make it seem like the Western regimes are opposed to these people. So these people are the defenders of our people, the Muslims against the enemy, whereas they're all in cahoots together. That's the gist of his of this passage. So for someone to apprise themselves of Sayyid Qutb's thought, the only portion of his tafsir that's really available in English is Juz 30, which has been translated and it's widely available in the English-speaking world. Other books of his that are available are Milestones, which is, that's an important book that any Muslim should read in order to understand that viewpoint. And also Social Justice in Islam and Islam and Universal Peace. These are also available in English. I personally haven't read them. And I have to plead ignorance also that I haven't really read Fi Dhilal al-Qur'an in the Arabic. And so my ability to comment on it intelligently is very limited. So I will leave it at that, and whatever investigation you're able to make on this, these two authors, it's an important area to have some knowledge of. And Allah knows best. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.